On today's episode, sports collector legend Corey Shanis showed us the classic, the card we were expecting, the 1909 T206 Honus Wagner, but he also showed us a lot more and a bunch of surprises, crazy surprises. I'm excited for you guys to see this episode. Let me know what you think. I grew up such a fan of sports memorabilia and sports cards, and I'm really excited that this show is both going to highlight that as well as the awesome entrepreneurs that make it all possible. Let's do it. Welcome back to Talking Shop. We have a very special guest, Corey Shanis, in on the show. My man, I appreciate you doing this.
My pleasure.
So my first question here is, how did you get into collecting in the first place? Like, how did that begin?
I think it's in my genes. Since I was very, very young, I've always been obsessed with it. And I use the word obsessed with a capital O. My mother is a former collector, well, she's deceased, was a former collector and dealer of art, silverware, coins, stamps, you name it, she did it. And she loved collecting, and it's still that passion in me. And it's the thing I like it about the most is that it's not about the money. That when I got started doing these things in the 60s, baseball cards had no value.
Right.
You could buy a Mickey Mantle card then for 50 cents. And my obsession with it then was every bit as great as it is now. And sometimes when I do deals, I do trades, for example, the relative values of the items might be measured in thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, but it's like monopoly money. You give in one hand and you take in the other. It's just an object for an object. And I think that's what collecting is all about. It's just the joy of doing it. And what you collect is not really that important. If you get a passion doing this or that, hey, go for it.
It's funny. That's been a really common theme from every guest we've had so far, that if you're doing it for the money, you're not actually doing it.
That if you're in the space for money, you're not going to last long, because you're going to find that you get bored, and you're going to find that you become sort of caustic about it, and you really become somebody that it's not much fun for you anymore. For me, I've never lost my enjoyment of it. And it's really 40 years. I started in my early 20s. I'll be 62 in April. Yeah. And I've never lost really my passion for it.
Yeah, I feel sorry for it. And look, as a kid in grammar school, I would ride my bike to school in the mid-'60s, flip baseball cards. Nobody put cards in holders, cared about price guides, and we just loved doing it. Then when I got older, got married, had kids, and they would have these things in plastic and graded and, pay big money for it. It just loses a big part of it. I remember some years ago, I was on a panel at an auction house talking about collecting, and sitting next to me was a guy who collected antique Chinese jade.
Okay.
And something I know nothing about. And I'm just looking at him talk, the passion that this guy had. It was every bit as great as my passion when I collect. I'm just looking at it and saying, this is what it's all about. This guy likes or loves what he does as much as I love what I do. And I'm happy for him.
And then my favorite thing about it is, at the end of the day, when you see like the astonishing amalgamation of all of these different collectors with all of their different individual insane collections that took 30, 40, 50 years to collect. That's my favorite thing, the whole thing. And one of the reasons why, I love hearing and seeing what you
Yeah, got. I mean, all the items in my collection, there's a story behind each one. And I mean, people ever ask, would you sell? And my answer always is, I hope I never have to. Mm-hmm. If I ever would sell, I would basically take everything I had, come up with some appraised value, whatever that would be, and probably multiply it by 5 or 10. I mean, how do you put a price on searching for an item one by one? There are items that I have that I spent 15 years searching for. And I take great pride in knowing what's out there, who has it. And with a lot of people, I simply say, look, enjoy it while you have it. If the day comes you ever want to sell it for whatever reason, I'd love to hear from you. No hard sell. And more times than not, when they're ready, I get that first call, because they know it's going to a collector. I'm going to pay a fair price. I'm not trying to make money on it. And that's one way I do it.
That's amazing. What does your search look like? Like what does a search for an item for you look like? Does it actually entail going to each individual show and just talking to everybody and taking everybody's name, or what does that look like?
I pretty know all the big players in the field that I collect, who has what. Of course, every now and then a new find comes up, and I kind of keep track of that. I read the publications that are out there, the trade journals. But it's just knowledge compiled over many, many years. And it's just something that's part of the enjoyment of doing it, not just owning it, but searching for it.
And is that something that you catalog, or do you just keep it all in your head?
I keep most of it in my head. I mean, there's a story, each item I pretty much know what I have. I'm supposed to have a list somewhere of what I have, but I just know doing it this way, one by one, you just know what you have.
What was the first card or first item that you really searched for and then were just pumped to find it?
Well, I remember the first time I ever ordered a baseball card, I think was in the 1960s from the Card Collectors Company. I remember scotch taping, I think, 2 pennies to a piece of paper in an envelope to get a Mets team card. It's the first commercial transaction I remember sending away for in the mail. I remember buying my first pack of baseball cards in 19 Tops in the fall of 1963. My passion was always the Honus Wagner card. Even though my collecting interest these days is more memorabilia than cards, like so many people, I started out in cards, and everybody knew about the Wagner card. In the 1960s, it was maybe a $1,500 card. That even might be high. And I remember when I first saw one at the Burner collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, just staring at that thing, I was just dumbstruck with it. And I had an opportunity in 1984 to acquire a really nice one from an old-time collector. And with the help from my father, I was able to do it. And I remember when I got that card. To this day, I've never touched the card. My hands would shake too much when I'd have it. I was home. I had the flu at that time, and I was home for about a week. I don't think 10 minutes went by without me looking at that card. It was just like a dream come true. My father, I remember he said to me, Corey, one day that card could be worth, say, $100,000. I said, no, it can never be worth that. It was never about the money.
Right, but still.
Yeah, but he also said to me, because, I am a mix of my parents. I got the collecting gene from my mother. I got other great things from my father. My father wasn't really a collector, although we learned quite a bit from my mother. And he said to me, okay, you have the Wagner card. Why collect? What more is there? And I said, Dad, you don't understand. This is a great start, but believe me, I'll find other things I want to collect.
It is really a great start, though. That is definitely true. No, that's amazing. Do you have it with you?
I do. So here, let me show you. This will go. When I got it, I had it sort of displayed in a certain kind of way. I had this is this. Can you see this?
Yeah, I can.
All right. So this is it's. I'll show it as we do it. But I had a leather-bound book made for it that says Honus Wagner T206 Sweet Caporal cigarettes, 1909. The T206 issue came out 3 years, 1909 to 1911. The Wagner card, before it was pulled from distribution, came out the first part of it in 1909. So that's why it says 1909. There were a number of companies, brands, cigarette brands then. The 2 biggest ones were Piedmont and Sweet Caporal. Except for a very, very small handful, all the known Wagner cards have the Sweet Caporal back. Those that have the Piedmont back, and there may be a handful, it's still unclear if they were ever distributed in cigarette packs or they were just pulled from maybe by a printer on a sheet run and hand cut outside the factory. That's still a little bit up in the air. But this is the Sweet Caporal one. And as I say, it became available in 1984. and that's when I bought it. So what I did, I had, you can see a box made with some design on it.
That's cool.
And if you open it up, I framed it like this.
Wow.
This is showing. I had it encapsulated in Mylar, so it will always be preserved. This is vacuum sealed. There was no treatment put in the car. I just wanted to preserve it, and I had this put on. If you look at it this way, you see a background, a red background. That was done like this. So if you take it out like that, you can see the back of the card that says Sweet Cackle Cigarettes. So this is just the way I displayed it.
That's cool.
Somebody probably suggested how I do it. I don't think I'm creative enough to think of it myself, but that's how I do it. I never graded the cards. I never saw a reason to do it. I mean, I know the card's real. People say, well, if you ever want to sell it, you'll have to get it graded. I said, so if I ever want to sell it, I'll get it graded, but God willing, I'll never have to sell it.
Are you at all curious? Do you have any idea what grade it would be?
Yeah, it would probably be, I had somebody from one of the major grading companies look at it some years ago who very much wanted to grade it because it's a big publicity thing for the company. Yeah. And I told them, if you want to do it, you can do that, but I'm not taking it out of the frame. And their policy is for them to grade a card, they have to have the card in hand, the physical card, which I respect to see if there's anything wrong with it, which I wasn't willing to do. But it would grade a 5 or 5.5, excellent to X plus. So it's a really nice card.
Is that to date your favorite card in your collection still?
I think so. I mean, it is. There's so much history to it. It is my favorite card. It's a little bit misleading because it's, my opinion, by far the most valuable baseball card there is, but it's not the rarest by any stretch. In fact, I'll show you something else. I mean, this is not the card. This is a picture of a card. This is not the actual card. This is a Just So card of Cy Young from 1893.
Whoa.
It's a regional issue that was distributed in Cleveland. The card wasn't even known to exist until maybe 20, 30 years ago. And there's exactly one known, and that's this one.
Jeez.
And it's Cy Young's first card, and Cy Young is Cy Young. It's obviously a very, very valuable card. It's much, much rarer than the Wagner card. It would sell for a lot of money, but it would not sell, in my opinion, for anything close to what the Wagner card would sell for.
So good. You know you're good when they name awards after you.
Yes. I mean, it's funny to say that because that card's got a lot going for it. The 1890s is a period when there were really very, very few baseball issues. In fact, there was only one major issue, which came out in 1895. It's like nothing from 1890 to 1903. So Cy Young, the peak of his career was during a time there's really nothing of note to be issued for him.
Yeah, that's amazing. I heard you have a pretty cool Babe Ruth photo as well.
I have a number of Babe Ruth items. Another time I can show it to you, but I have a picture of Babe Ruth that was taken at St. Mary's, where he went to school. Before he was signed as a minor league baseball player by the Baltimore team. And it shows him, I think, in 1912 with his high school team, which is really, a great shot. And I have, this came out in 1914, I think. Baltimore, the Baltimore News newspaper issued a set of the Baltimore team. And it came out in 1914, and that was here Babe Ruth was on it. So that is Babe Ruth's first card. People argue whether it should be regarded as rookie card because he wasn't yet a Major League Baseball player. They're called rookie card, whatever. But that's an old Babe Ruth item I have.
That's amazing. Do you collect anything modern as well, or how do you look at that in comparison to the more vintage stuff?
I do. Again, another time I can show you some other stuff, but I do have some modern things. I remember I like how baseball interacts with other fields.
Okay.
For example, American history. So I
Yes.
remember, you might be a little young for this, during the Cold War, when it ended, when Reagan was president, that Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the head of Russia, USSR, met for a state dinner at the White House, and Joe DiMaggio was on the receiving line. And when he got up to Reagan and Gorbachev, he pulls out a baseball and asked the two of them to sign it. And to me, it's part of history, because I think Reagan was instrumental in ending the Cold War. It's a very important event in terms of our foreign policy. So here's a baseball signed by these two guys. I remember when that happened, just following the whole state dinner and the politics of it. And in the paper, they showed the ball and reading about it. And of course, I was a baseball collector, thinking to myself, my gosh, would I ever love to own that ball someday? This is from the late 80s, so it's a modern object. And then when DiMaggio died some years later and his estate was sold at auction, that was the one thing I went for.
Wow.
And there's another item I have. One of my interests educationally was astronomy. I was an astronomy major in college. I always liked that. So how does that relate to baseball? Well, when Kennedy said, we're going to put a man on the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
And NASA got going, and they had the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs, each with 10 astronauts. 30 astronauts were hired. This was to get us on the moon, which happened in 1969. Well, these 30 astronauts were the guests of the Houston Colt 45s in 1963 at a baseball game. And they were sitting with the manager's wife. And she asked them if they would sign a ball. So that's the ball I have with all 30 signatures, the first 30 American astronauts. I mean, you can't put a price in this. I mean, this is American history. Tragically, some of them died a few years later. But it's just a fun thing how you can interplay baseball with other things. I'm an avid Beatle fan. So in 1966, they played at RFK Stadium concert. And one of the players on the Senators, I think it was Darrell Knowles, he brought 3 balls to the clubhouse boy and asked the Beatles to sign them. And I have one of those balls, which was later sold by his family. Isn't that cool?
That's really, really cool. I like
but
that.
This is what collecting is. It's not just a card in a slab. How much is this worth? I mean, if somebody gets pleasure out of that, who am I to judge what somebody does? But it's just the fun of collecting. You can use your imagination in any which way to get pleasure out of it.
Oh, 100%. Who are some of your favorite athletes from all time?
Well, my favorite was Mickey Mantle. I mean, I grew up as a Yankee fan, and when I got into this, really the mid-'60s, the Yankees were still the Yankees. They fell apart after that, but it was always Mickey Mantle, Mickey Mantle's baseball card. I have all of my original cards I have as a kid. I would never sell them. I have almost this complete run, except for 1 or 2 cards from the early 50s, which I later acquired. But the ones that are most valuable to me, I think from 52 on up, except for 52 Topps and 51 Bowman. And the 52 Topps I later acquired. The 51 Bowman I still at some day will get. I bought all those cards either in packs or for 50 cents or $1 from the card collectors company. The condition is maybe VGX, maybe XX plus or some of them, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I would never, ever get rid of that.
Right.
I remember one of them, I got a card, a 1953 Bowman card, and it didn't fit in the photo album I have, so I took a scissors and trimmed it. And a friend of mine is just playing, you can't trim this. You can't do it. I mean, you're not allowed to trim a baseball card. I said, but I want to enjoy it. I want to see it. So I trimmed it. He goes, you just destroyed the card, which I did by today's standards. About a few months later, after I trimmed it, I figured, I shouldn't have trimmed it. So I spent another $1 and got another one. That was what collecting was like then.
Wow.
It's different.
How things have changed.
How things have changed.
Now, to get a decent card, you have to spend thousands of dollars on a box.
You do. And when people open packs, I mean, they put surgical gloves on, they sterilize the thing, they take it out like a surgeon, they stick it in a plastic something or other. I'm saying, what are you doing?
Yeah,
I feel very fortunate. I got started when I did because it's never been about the money, and people say, well, do you look at it as an investment? And I say, no, but it's a great thing to do because unlike spending money on something disposable, a vacation, a night out, or a show or something, which is wonderful to do, it gives you great memories. Here, I'm putting money into things I get tremendous satisfaction and ownership. And yet, if I ever need to sell it, it's an appreciating asset. So the way I'd say it is truly like having your cake and eating it too. That you're spending money on something that gives you great pleasure for disposable income, but you're also investing it in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely very different from like buying a sports car and then losing half the value once you drive it off the lot.
That's right. And I'm not, and there are people that do that. And you know, who am I to judge what somebody does with the money? I mean, my father, you know, he owned a couple of racehorses, and he was in it the right way. It was never to make money. He knew he'd never get his money out of it, but he did it within his means, and he got great enjoyment out of it. He lives, you know, you have one life to live. He enjoyed it. So as long as you do it the right way, there's nothing wrong with it. But this is what I do for my kicks, and it's been great.
That's amazing. Are you interested in doing the same for any other sports in the future, or are you always going to be primarily baseball?
Mostly baseball. I mean, I do dabble in, I have some Beatles stuff I like. I collect toys that I played with as a kid. And that's another thing. Like I can get a yo-yo from the 1960s that I remember playing with, and it would cost me at eBay $25. And I'd be as thrilled about buying that as buying something very expensive in a baseball collectible. Again, it's just collecting. But I just like to collect, and I can't. Sometimes I wonder, why am I so passionate about it? And the answer is I don't know. But why fight it? I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And one of the things, although you know, in a lot of ways, I wish I was doing it when you were doing it at the beginning. But at the same time, you know, having everything so accessible through platforms like eBay is amazing. Have you started like utilizing obviously these new platforms, or do you mostly still go like straight to the source?
For toys, I can do eBay. For the baseball stuff that I collect, it's at a level there are very few things now that would really interest me because I have a lot of things. So it's sort of hard to get turned on these days like I would do in the past. And with auction houses now on the internet, the really good stuff that I'd be interested in would really never come up on eBay. Or if it would be on eBay, it would be some really stupid price that some guy would be listing for 5 years. Nobody would ever consider buying it. So it's really through auctions and through private connections that I have.
Got it. That's amazing. Now, final question here. What is a piece of advice you would give to young collectors today?
Collect what you like. Don't do it for the money. And this is a piece of advice that I got many years ago from an old-time collector. And I was considering, there were 2 cards I was interested in, and I was deciding which one I wanted. And I said, well, most people think I should pick this one instead of that one. And he said, forget what most people think. What do you like? This is for you. So I'd say to collectors, find something you like to do that really turns you on. Don't do it for the money, and do it for the enjoyment, and do it within your means. That's really important. Even though I made comments before, this could be a great investment, I don't do it for that reason. So you got to be really, really careful about that. So unless you're doing this as a dealer to make money, and these young kids are obviously not doing it, just say to somebody, okay, I like this, I can afford it, I'm going to get satisfaction out of it, and even if it becomes worthless, it was still worth doing. That's what I'd say to somebody.
That's great. My man, I appreciate you coming on so much.
My pleasure.